Hello and welcome everybody. This is soon-to-be Grandmaster Sam Shankland, and today I would like to conclude my series on Garry Kasparov. And I looked at some of his great achievements as a chess player in the first 9 videos. And in this last one, I'd just like to talk about his achievements as a writer and what he's done for chess in general, post-retirement and whatnot. Kasparov has written many books, 2 very famous ones about his matches with Karpov, which I think are a great read for anyone, even people who aren't actually interested in chess itself and want to, just learn about the politics surrounding it and what went on in that World Championship match. He wrote a very good book on the Scheveningen, co-authored with Alexander Nikitin, who is one of his coaches at a young age, and he's been coaching some good players like Magnus Carlsen recently, and it helped him really shoot up. But what I'm going to do today is show a game that I actually played, where I won really nicely, I thought. And a lot of the game was inspired by Kasparov's writings. So, okay, I'm playing black against an IM from Hungary, Erdeli Zambor. It's about 2,400. And started out as a Sicilian, which is Kasparov's bet. And I played the Scheveningen, like he was talking about in his book. And I think, to be honest, some of the analysis on the carriage attack with g4 is not that convincing. Although, okay, some people could disagree, and there was old analysis. But in this game, Erdeli played bishop e2, which is a little bit different. So now a6. And we've basically transposed into a Najdorf-Scheveningen structure. In my Najdorf series, I recommended, I think, the move e6 after bishop e2, which could transpose to a classical Scheveningen. But my opponent here was actually a little more ambitious, and he looked for other options. So we played bishop e3. And now I've had this position a few times before, and queen c7 is, I think, the main move with bishop e7 as sideline and whatnot. But I played the sideline here, which was actually inspired by Kasparov's book, which he recommended and said it was interesting without, giving a complete evaluation to it. So I played the move knight b to d7, and my next few moves just followed his analysis. So f4, and now b5. So I'm looking for a counterplay on the queen side with b4 immediately and bishop b7. In the meantime, I'm somewhat neglecting the development of my king side, but White's setup is not really conducive for a kingside attack, so I wasn't too worried about this. He was more looking for play in the center, and that wasn't such a bother for me. So the game continues, b5, bishop f3, and now bishop b7. And so, for example, there was some really sharp line with e5 here. And I read through Kasparov's notes, and I totally agree when he gave this line, bishop takes f3, now if queen takes f3, d takes e5. And if he takes after knight takes e5, black's a pawn to the good and should have a pretty nice position. But the critical test would be knight c6. But here I think after just queen c7, black ended up with a fine position. And Kasparov, I think, gave the line knight takes e5, rook c8, and he said black was quite fine, and I agree. It looks like he has a good position. There's nothing to worry about. Or f takes e5, I think rook c8 as well is correct. And point is after e takes f6, queen takes c6. I think black's position is completely playable. White has to do something about this pawn here. So after some f takes g7, bishop takes g7. Note that it would be a mistake to capture the queen here because white can give this intermediate move, g takes f8 with check, and then when he recaptures the queen, we see that he took this bishop on f8, and now that extra bishop is here and white's winning. But just bishop takes g7, and it looks like black's kingside's a little compromised, but I think the queens are coming off by 4, so I don't think white can afford to avoid a queen trade. For example, if he were to move the queen somewhere to try to take advantage of black's misplaced king or the fact that his king won't have any long-term safety, I think after bishop takes c3, it's actually black who's attacking white. So in this endgame here, I think is actually just better for black. It looks like he's going to win some pawns on b2 or c2 when b4 rolls through. So That was one variation that Kasparov had given. And another was after knight takes f3. I think he gave some takes, and now knight g4. And I believe b4 was also an interesting move in this position. And he gave both of these lines and did some analysis. And I would feel wrong, just reading through his analysis for everyone here because, he did write the book. People should have to buy the book to get the analysis. But anyhow, I would just say that this part of the opening and sort of the plans that he suggested were very strong. So I'd recommend this book again, which is, I think it's called the Classical Ski Writing of Kasparov and Nikitin. Anyhow, the game White did not play e5 because he knew it didn't end up so well. So he played a3, which prevents b4. And now, okay, so I debated it for a while here, and I ultimately ended up deciding on queen to c7. Rook c8, I think, is also quite a reasonable move. I'm even pondering some possible sacrifices on c3 to capture e4, but I think the move I played seems quite fine. Queen c7, which is really in the spirit of the position, controlling the e5 square further, forever eliminating e5 tactics from White. I thought this made a lot of sense. Okay, so White immediately went to fix the pawn structure with f5. I was a bit compliant, e5, and now knight b3. So bishop e7. And White sort of has to declare what he wants to do at this point. It's not really clear just yet what he's planning. Although with his next move, White sort of showed some aggressive intentions. He played queen e2. Personally, I think it would be better to castle here. And I thought we have an unclear position. I think I was planning knight to b6, hoping to jump into c4 or maybe support the d5 break. And I thought the position seemed quite acceptable for black. Maybe not better, but playable in all senses of the word. So, but that would maybe have been a complicated game. Queen e2 was played, and this is not necessarily a horrible move by itself, but I think White's plan of castling queenside here, which looks like he's castling queenside and preparing g4, g5 action, I have a feeling that this is not going to work out too well, and I think that feeling was confirmed in the game. So why don't you guys take a second and stop here and think about what would you play if you were playing black here? This is a very important moment, and I think the move that I ended up playing was really strong. So, not to toot my own horn too much, but, toot. So, give yourself a second and see if you can figure out what to do. All right, so I think rook c8 is the best move, which is what I played. Castling, I think, is a little bit overambitious, because after g4, White's going to get g5 in very quickly. And it's going to be bothersome. White's going to hit g5, f6, and he's sort of got an automatic attack that plays itself. I mean, it's not very hard to imagine White's next move is g5, f6, or g6. It's pretty easy. Doesn't have to do much thinking. But rook c8 sort of delays this. And the main point is after g4, black has a nice counter thrust with d5. And this was sort of Kasparov's main idea in the Sicilian, is that when your opponent tries to attack on the wing, you usually want to look for counterplay in the center. And this is exactly what black does. And I think no matter how White captures this pawn, or how White reacts, he's going to have some problems. So black is threatening numerous things. D takes c4, knight takes c4. Probably the biggest threat at the moment is d4, which will just win piece in the game. So if White were to play g5 here, I think black can safely capture on e4, and he has a very nice position with a strong central presence. So White has to do something. He doesn't really have a convenient way to take on d5. If he takes with the knight, for example, I think after a strong move, queen takes c2, just leaving the knight on d5 for the moment, let's say queen c2, rook c2. White has a lot of weaknesses that need serious protection. b2 is already vulnerable. The g4 pawn might hang in the future. And black is getting ready to chop off this knight on d5 next move. White could try to take the bishop here, but he'll happily have to give up his e4 pawn. Well, probably not so happily for him, but happily for me. And it looks like black is just doing extremely well. So knight takes d5. It looks like it is bad on account of queen takes c2. E takes d5 is the critical test. And here there were a couple interesting moves that I considered. I think castling is actually the best move. I did not end up playing this, but the point is just to quickly prepare e4 so that, and he'll have the open e-file. So, for example, if white were to play g5, I think I could counterattack with e4. And some kind of knight takes e4, and then takes rook fe8. And I think white has serious problems along the e-file that are not going to be easy to solve. Another option for black would be knight takes d5, and I think in both cases he has full compensation for the minor material deficit, with all of his active pieces in the center opening up while white's king doesn't really have a safe place to go. So I think that was actually the best option. White could try other things like castling here, but I think after some knight b6, black's going to play rook d8. He'll take the pawn back on d5 and have a very nice position. Or if white castles long, I think black has a really nice move, so I'll give you a second to see if you can find it. All right, so the move is bishop takes a3, which is prepare using the fact that this pawn on b2 is overworked defending a3 and c3. If white were to take the bishop after queen takes c3, black should have a pretty decisive initiative, as well as some probably extra material in the next couple moves. So, and if white were to ignore it, I'm actually threatening queen takes c3 on its own anyway. If white were to try to avoid queen c3, I can probably sacrifice more pieces, and it doesn't turn out too well for white's king. So, going back, I think castles was actually the best move. e4 was also interesting, but in the end I actually decided to play b4, which I think is actually slightly inaccurate. My goal was pretty obvious, just to put pressure on the c3 knight and then take the d5 pawn. But I think black still has quite a good game here, but I think after castles he was actually much better. So this was maybe a point where Kasparov would have played a little better than me. Okay, so a takes b4, bishop takes b4, and it's a little bit hard to see what white wants to do now. Black's threatening bishop takes c3, he's threatening knight takes d5, he's going to win some material, it looks like. So white has to be very careful. But, like for example, if white were to castle short, I think I can just go play takes, and knight takes d5. And now black has equalized material, and it looks like he's going to win another pawn on c3. If white were to take after bishop takes d5, this diagonal to the king looks really ugly. Also note that the pawn on a6 is not captured with bull because of bishop c4 tactics, with hitting everything on this diagonal. So this would just not be good for white. And if he castles queenside further after, then bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, and some queen b4, it looks to me like black has a very strong initiative that is pretty likely to win the game. So that would not be too much fun for white. He decided to break the pin with bishop d2, which makes a lot of sense. And now I castled. White could play g5, which is always sort of the worry when I'm castling into the attack. But I think, again, here, the move e4 leads to very good counterplay for black. For example, takes, and I'm going to recapture on f6 and quickly jump into the center files with my rooks, and I think white's king in the center is going to feel very unhappy, and I'm probably going to take the pawn on d5, and I think white is just much worse. And if white were to retreat the bishop after some knight takes d5, black should just be better, I would think. He also could even consider more radical options like e3. In fact, I really like this move. Point is, if queen takes c3, there's rook fe8, pinning the queen. And if bishop takes e3, now knight takes d5, packs a much more powerful punch because this knight is pinned. So I think in either of these cases, in any of these cases, really, black ends up with a great position. So my opponent found, I think, the best move with d6, sacrificing a pawn back to trade off these bishops, which avoids any e4 unpleasantness, which will gain so much time. And it also drags my b4 bishop away from the action somewhat. So takes, and now castle long. So ultimately we've got, or excuse me, put rook f1 first. Castling long is also possible. So, and now white is threatening the pawn on a6, and so I should probably do something about it, but I decided I didn't care. I played knight c5. So this sort of does protect it, but after knight takes c5, bishop takes c5, the point is if he takes my pawn, I'm going to grab b2. And that's not going to be good for white. And here, white castled along, and it looks like we're just going to have a crazy attack versus attack situation, which everyone loves, and Kasparov was sort of the king of those positions. Where black obviously has some open lines on the queen side to work with, and white's quickly preparing for g5 and king side action. So game continued. Bishop d4. Actually, sorry. I messed up. White played g5 and then castled long. It's pretty similar. Bishop d4. It's about the same thing. It should have transposed anyway. So yeah, bishop d4. I think this was a strong move because I'm looking for attacking possibilities along this diagonal, and I'm trying to bring my knight into c5. Now we see the importance of this because if I can play rook b8 and threaten mate on b2, white has two options. Move the knight to a4, which now won't work because of my bishop on d4, or play his pawn to b3, which won't work because my knight on c5 will sacrifice and deliver the final punch. So I think bishop d4 was a really helpful move. Okay, so white played g6. And he's trying to open up lines, obviously. I could have tried knight c5, but for some reason I'm not remembering. I didn't like this move. This game was played back in 2009, so I don't remember everything. I eventually came up with a move that I thought was pretty strong. I played rook c6, I think. So, yeah, I played rook c6. And the idea behind this move was I'm defending along the third rank, and I'm preparing to bring the other rook to b8 so that I'm putting pressure on the c and b files. For example, if I were to just play a nothing move here, after rook b8, the typical b3 to stop the attack would just fail the bishop takes c3. Well, this wouldn't be the case if I had taken the rook that was on the c file to the b file. So I thought rook c6 was a really nice multi-purpose move, although it's possible I could have just jumped in with knight c5. Anyhow, white played rook f3, which I think is kind of analogous in a kind of ironic way, a very multi-purpose move as well. He's preparing for rook h3, and he's preparing to, and he's also defending along the third rank for the c3 knight and whatnot. So, and then I played knight c5. I considered briefly the possibility of just taking this pawn, which was one of my threats with rook c6, and then takes, and rook takes here. And I think that black should be a bit better with his pawn mass, but I didn't really feel like a positional struggle here where I try to push my pawns through when my king's a little open. I would have much preferred direct confrontation. And I don't know, I had a rough game the previous game where I'd drawn with white against some 2400, and I was in an aggressive mood. So I played knight c5. So g takes h7 check. Now, of course, I can't take the pawn because after rook h3 check, king g8, queen h5, white gets a very strong attack. So this is a kind of instructive moment. I use the white pawn as my shield, trying to defend myself. So, and now white plays a strong move f6, trying to open up my king further at any cost. If I were to take this pawn, you can play moves like bishop h6 and then queen g2, and suddenly there's mating threats, and I didn't really want any piece of that. You could also start with queen g2 and then rook g3. It looked like there was very clear counterplay, so I didn't want to do anything like that. But I think I found a really nice move here that sort of sealed the game in my favor. So let's see if you can pause your video and find it yourself. Okay, so if you want more time, keep your video paused. The move is e4. And this move gains tempo on the rook, but more importantly, it lends defense to the g7 pawn with the bishop. If I were to just rush in and play something rash like rook b8, I think after takes, and rook g3 check, I might have some issues with the king. King takes would be impossible on account of queen h5 with mate. With king g8 and king h8, we can give a check on g8, and the black king is getting opened up, and some of his attacking pieces are going to get traded off. So I wanted to keep my king on h8 without letting any white pieces in. So I decided to play e4, I hit the rook, and my bishop will come back, and it's still just as active on g7, putting pressure on the white king side. and it looks like it should be enough to win the game for black. For example, with fg7, bishop g7, rook g3, I think after rook b8, white can just resign. Looks like black's attack comes first after, say, b3, and then we sacrifice and queen b3, and there's white gets mated. So this wouldn't quite work for white. He tried sort of the desperate queen g2, looking for a mate threat, but here I can just play bishop takes f6, and all the files stay closed. If white's rook is again under attack, note that I couldn't have taken it last move because of the mate on g7. But after bishop takes f6, I really am threatening the rook, and if he'd moved it somewhere again after rook b8, it looks like the whole house falls down for white. So white sacrificed the exchange and played bishop e3, I guess hoping to kick the knight and play bishop d4, which is good defensively and offensively, but I was not impressed, and I just played rook b8, and soon white was mated. So white played b3 to try to avert the inevitable, but after knight takes b3, takes, and queen takes b3, bishop d4, queen a3 check with rook b2 on the way winning the queen, white resigned. So this is a game I played sort of in Kasparov's style, obviously not as well as he would have played it, but he inspired it both with his games and more importantly with his writings. And I think his writings have helped a lot of players really improve their games. And, you know, I just figured I should conclude the series by showing that, well, he was the greatest player of all time. He was also much more than just a player. He was, you know, an author and a real contributor to the game of chess outside of just playing. So anyhow, that will conclude my series on the greatest player who ever lived. And until next time, this is Sam Shanklin signing off.